Testing, testing. Is that coming through on the Zoom? Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Test, 1, 2, 3.
Otherwise, everything is.
Can you hear me? You can hear me on the Zoom too? Good. Good morning, colleagues. This is Delegate Slater. I'm serving as Chair Pro Tem today of the Naa'bik'iyati Committee meeting and Speaker Pro Tem for administrative purposes during this week. It's now 10:11 a.m. and I think we have a sufficient number of colleagues on the Zoom and here in the chamber. We have Delegate Simpson, Delegate Casey Johnson, Delegate Helena Naa'bik'iyati, and Delegate Damon here in the chamber, of course, with myself. And at this time, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's now 10:12 a.m., and I'm going to ask our staff to do a roll call. Thank you.
Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton answered roll call. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw answered roll call. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Crowley. Honorable Speaker, Crystalline Crowley answered roll call. Honorable Amber Knaz-Bakrati. Honorable Amber Knaz-Bakrati. Honorable Amber Knaz-Bakrati did not answer roll call. Honorable Herman Daniels. Honorable Herman Daniels answered roll call. Honorable Vince James. Honorable Vince James answered roll call. Honorable Brenda Jesus. Honorable Brenda Jesus. Honorable Brenda Jesus is excused. Honorable Casey Johnson is present. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez answered roll call. Honorable Rick Nez. Honorable Rick Nez answered roll call. Honorable Nathan Nota. Honorable Nathan Nota answered roll call. Honorable Shondine Parrish. Honorable Shondine Parrish. Honorable Sharndine Parrish did not answer roll call. Honorable Jermaine Simonson. Honorable Jermaine Simonson answered roll call, excuse me. Honorable George Toll. Honorable George Toll. Honorable George Toll did not answer roll call. Honorable Otto So. Honorable Otto So. Honorable Otto So did not answer roll call. Honorable Curtis Unito. Honorable Curtis Unito answered roll call. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie answered roll call. Going back up, Honorable Stephen Honorable Stephen Arvizo. How do you, Honorable Stephen Arvizo. Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not answer roll call. Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay did not answer roll call. Honorable Amber Kenez-Bakrati. Honorable Amber Kenez-Bakrati answered roll call via text. Honorable Sharndine Parrish. Honorable Sharndine Parrish. Honorable Sharndine Parrish did not answer roll call. Honorable George Toll. Honorable George Toll answered roll call. Honorable Otto So. Honorable Otto So. Honorable Otto So answered roll call. With that, Pro Tem Speaker, you have 19 delegates, including yourself, who are present via Zoom and in the chambers for today's meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sosi. We move on down to our invocation. Delegate Sherilyn Yazzie, could you provide us with an invocation this morning? Yes.
Hello, 25th Navajo Nation Council. I just want to say a quick prayer. I want to be thankful for our day, for us to be able to attend and listen to each other with an open heart, open mind, and that we remember our community and our people and all the services that we would provide for them. Amen.
Thank you, Delegate Yazzie. We're going to move on to item 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 2-minute limit per delegate. We have no one in the queue. Going twice. Going 3 times. We're going to move to item 3, review and adopt the agenda. Staff, can we please read the proposed agenda as posted, written into the record?
Good morning, delegates, pro temp, and participating audience. This is the Naa'bik'iyati Committee agenda of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. This is a regular meeting held via teleconference and in person. Today's date is Thursday, April 13, 2023, 10 o'clock a.m. Proposed agenda, presiding chair, Honorable Carl R. Slater, Speaker Pro Temp, 25th Navajo Nation Council. 1, call meeting to order, roll call, invocation. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journals. There is one, March 23rd, 2023. 5, receiving reports. Report A, report from Office of the President and Vice President and Department of Personnel Management on the Navajo Nation general and minimum wage. Report provided by the staff of Office of the President and Vice President and Navajo Department of Personnel Management. 6, old business, there is none. 7, new business, legislation A, legislation number 0044-23. B, legislation 0042-23. C, legislation 0040-23. D, legislation 0034-23. E, legislation 0033-23. F, legislation 0015-23. G, legislation 0068-23. H, legislation 0067-23. I, legislation 0064-23. J, legislation 0065-23. K, legislation 0049-23. L, legislation 0051-23. M, legislation 0053-23. N, legislation 0054-23. 8, close of meetings, announcements, and adjournment. Mr. Pro Tem Speaker.
Thank you. The agenda has been read into the record. The chair will recognize a motion to adopt and consider the agenda. Colleagues, do you need some more coffee? The chair will consider a motion to consider and adopt the agenda. Can they hear us on the Zoom? Okay. What about in the chambers, colleagues? We have a motion from Delegate Johnson. Do we have a second? Who was the second? I didn't hear it. Okay, thank you. The main motion will actually come from Delegate Damon, and the second will be from Delegate Yazzie. Committee members, do we have any questions or discussion on the agenda? The chair recognizes Delegate Johnson, and I believe we have Delegate Crotty in the queue. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, Bene. Can everybody hear me? Good. Just want to say it's a beautiful morning. The weather's warming up. Very grateful for all the moisture we had. Very grateful to be alive. It's good to be here in person, to see everybody here. And thankful. I want to thank everybody for being on the call. All our honorable colleagues of the 25th Navajo Nation Council. And I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to amend the agenda to add legislations 0045-23, legislation 0047-24, 4723, legislation 0050-23, legislation 0058-23, legislation 0059-23, legislation 0056-23, legislation 00602-23, legislation 0062-23, legislation 0052-23, legislation 0048-23, legislation 0055-23, and legislation 0061-23.
Thank you, Delegate Johnson.
I'd like to go ahead and delete legislation 0040-23. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Johnson. Before proceeding with a second, I'm going to ask Ms. Cook to please read the legislation titles into the record. Thank you.
Amendment 1, adding the following legislations. Legislation 0045-23, an action relating to health, education, and human services, law and order, budget and finance, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, approving the authorization, the mutual aid intergovernmental agreement between the Navajo Nation, Division of Public Safety, Navajo Police Department, and the City of Page, Arizona. Sponsors, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. Co-sponsor, Honorable Helena Naa'bik'iyati. Legislation 0047-23, an action relating to the Resource and Development and Naa'bik'iyati committees, confirming the appointment of Tico Charlie as the Executive Director for the Office of Navajo Telecommunications Regulatory Commission. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Legislation 0050-23, an action relating to the Budget and Finance, Resource and Development, Health, Education, and Human Services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $2 million from the unreserved, undesignated fund balance, UUFB, for the 110 chapters Summer 2023 Youth Employment Programs, waiving 12 NNC, Section 820E, Section 820F, Section 820J, and Section 820L to allow use of the UUFB funds for recurring chapter expenses. Sponsors, Honorable Seth Damon. Co-sponsor is Honorable Casey Allen Johnson. Legislation 0058-23, an action relating to the Budget and Finance, Resource and Development, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $3,879,180 from the Sihasin Fund for a new Navajo Nation modular office building in Crown Point, approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Co-sponsor, Honorable Norman M. Begay. Legislation 0059-23, an action relating to the Budget and Finance, Resource and Development, Health, Education, and Human Services, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, amending CAP-39-18 to extend the Sihasin Fund's reversion deadline for Navajo Technical University's Crown Point Campus Student Housing Expenditure Plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Legislation 0056-23, an action relating to Budget and Finance, Health, Education, and Human Services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving the use of Title 4-E funds by the Navajo Division of Social Services. Sponsor, Honorable Andy Nez. Legislation 0060-23, an action relating to the Budget and Finance, Health, Education, and Human Services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $863,570 from the Sihasin Fund to the Office of Diné Youth to cover a funding shortfall for the Crown Point Youth Complex, approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Legislation 0062-23, an action relating to the Health, Education, and Human Services, Budget and Finance, and Naa'bik'iyati Committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Approving $1,573,288 from the unreserved, undesignated fund balance to the Division of Social Services for a grant to St. Michael's Association for Special Education. Sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus. Co-sponsor, Honorable Andy Nez. Legislation 0052-23, an act relating to the Law and Order, Resource and Development, and Naa'bik'iyati Committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Amending 2 NNC, Section 104, and 11 NNC, Section 8B, to prohibit council delegates from serving as board members and shareholders representatives for Navajo Nation-owned instrumentalities. Sponsor, Honorable Amber Knazba-Crotty. Co-sponsor, Honorable Seth Damon. Legislation 0048-23, an action relating to the Resource and Development and Naa'bik'iyati Committees and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the appointment of Calvin Castillo as Division Director for the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Co-sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus. Legislation 0055-23, an action relating to the Resource and Development, Naa'bik'iyati Committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the appointment of Stephen B. Etzidi as Executive Director of the Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency. Sponsor, Brenda Jesus. Co-sponsor, Honorable Casey Allen Johnson. Legislation 0061-23, an action relating to Resource and Development, Naa'bik'iyati Committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming Wilder Mike Halona as Navajo Nation Division of Natural Resources Executive Director. Sponsor, Honorable Ricky Nez. Co-sponsor, Honorable Shauna Ann Claw. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Pro Tem Speaker.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cook. We have a motion from Delegate Johnson. Committee members, is there a second?
Okay. Now he wants to leave.
Committee members, Delegate Johnson would like to modify his motion to leave on legislation 4023. I'll recognize that as the current amendment motion right now. So we're only going to be adding on items, not deleting any items. And these are all the items that are presently available for action at the Naa'bik'iyati Committee. Was that Delegate Charles Newton who was seconding? And Delegate Charles Newton, you're comfortable with the amendment as it stands right now?
Adding on legislations and not deleting them, yeah.
Thank you. The chair recognizes a motion from Delegate Johnson and a second from Delegate Charles Newton to add on the aforementioned legislations. Committee members, is there any discussion on the amendment? We have Delegate Crotty and then Delegate Nez. Delegate Crotty, you recognize. Shema.
By Vice Chair or Delegate Johnson, and second by Delegate Townsend. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask for consideration to modify the amendment to create a consent agenda for the legislations that have been on the 24-hour notice agenda item. So that would be new business letter A through letter N. And that would be my request for modification. Thank you, Pro Tem Chair. In seeing that we have 26 legislations on our agenda, just want to make sure that the resolutions that need to be moved forward in seeing the votes from those legislations, there hasn't been either a need or, if not all straight through approvals, there hasn't been a petition to identify any of these legislations as highly controversial. Thank you. That is the rationale for my reason to modify the request. Thank you.
Delegate Johnson, there's a request to modify from Delegate Crotty.
I accept the modification.
Delegate Charles Newton, do you accept the modification?
Chair Slater, in terms of the consent agenda, can it be read on the record which legislations would be considered for consent agenda before I agree to the consent agenda? I know that Delegate Crotty did say, the items on the agenda, I believe she said A through L or M, but just for the record, I think it should be read into the record, and then we can decide from there. So just so we're on the same page, because I mean, we never know with the agenda which one is the actual real agenda that gets put to us. So just for verification, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Charles Newton. So for clarification, the request is to do, are you asking for the numbers or the titles?
Delegate Slater, I'm requesting that the legislations be read into the record. So, for instance, legislation A on the agenda would be 0044-23, legislation 0042-23. So just go down the line to read it into the record which legislations are being considered for the consent agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I didn't understand. When you said legislations read into the record, I didn't know if you meant the full text of the legislations, because none of them are final authority at NABI right now. I'll read it since I have it in front of me right here. So item A is legislation 4423. Item B is legislation 4223. Item C is legislation 4023. Item D is legislation 3423. Item E is legislation 3323. Item F is legislation 1523. Item G is legislation 6823. Item H is legislation 6723. Item I is legislation 6423. Item J is legislation 6523. Item K is legislation 4923. Item L is legislation 5123. Item M is legislation 5323. And item N is legislation 5423. Those are the items that are proposed to be included on the consent schedule.
I do agree with that. Thank you, Delegate Slater.
Thank you, Delegate Charles Newton. Committee members, we have Delegate Nez up. The modified motion as it stands right now is to add those items, and then add the legislations, 45 through 61, and then do a consent schedule for the items that I just mentioned. Delegate Andy Nez, you're recognized.
Great, thank you, Speaker Pro Tem, and to my colleagues online as well there in the chambers. I just wanted to also note that it be recognized under the new added legislation under letter V, legislation 0062-23, regarding the St. Michael's Association for Special Education. Our colleague, co-sponsor Seth Damon, has signed the legislation as well, and can the agenda reflect that he is a co-sponsor? So adding Honorable Seth Damon. Thank you.
We can work on that. Delegate Damon, did you co-sponsor? Delegate Nez, we'll work on that. Thank you. Moving on down, Delegate Simpson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Pro Tem Speaker. Thank you, members of the Naa'bik'iyati. Good morning, Hitishitoyate. Good morning. Mr. Pro Tem Speaker, just clarification again. What was modified? I mean, we added the certain legislations to the agenda, and it was motioned by Honorable Delegate Casey Begay and Honorable Delegate Junior Charles Newton. So then there's an amendment that was, modification was requested. So that's all the way up to, as a consent agenda, that's all the way up to O. Is that correct?
Thank you, Delegate Simpson. And Delegate Johnson, not Delegate Casey Begay.
Oh, Casey Johnson, I apologize.
It's okay.
I apologize, brother.
Okay, so to clarify, item 7A through 7N, so that means including 7N, in this motion is a consent agenda. That is all of the items that were posted on the proposed agenda. That will be the consent agenda.
Okay.
The new items that are being added
Okay.
are not on the consent agenda.
So, thank you, Mr. Pro Tem Speaker and members of the Naa'bik'iyati. And my brother, I apologize for calling you Casey Begay. Delegate Johnson, I apologize here. I worked with Mr. Begay for numerous years. This came out Begay, so I apologize, sir. Mr. Pro Tem Speaker, I'd like to request, I know a lot of our colleagues are not here, and I know that they're very busy in DC advocating for the Navajo Nation. And I know they're attending a lot of meetings, and sometimes they might not be able to cast their vote or debate on these issues. And I really want to say thank you for all my colleagues that are in DC, and some came back today or last night. I really appreciate your hard work in DC advocating on behalf of the Navajo Nation. We have a lot of work to do here, and we have 4 members here helping out our colleagues to try to get this legislation that needs to go before the council at the spring session next week. So with that, with this long agenda, and I think, again, I'd like to thank Madam Delegate Crotty for making that, asking for that modification to put those legislation in the consent agenda. Mr. Pro Tem Speaker, I'd like to ask my brother, Delegate Casey Johnson, and Madam Delegate Junior Charles Newton, if we can do the same thing for the legislation that were added to the agenda to be also on their consent agenda. And the legislation I'm talking about are legislation 0047-23, 0050-23, 005823, legislation 005923, legislation 0056-23, legislation 006023, legislation 0062-23, legislation 0052-23, legislation 0048-23, legislation 0055-23, and legislation 061-23. I know we're very time constrained, and I think that it'll be out of courtesy that when all our colleagues come back from DC, they'll have for next week's session, they can really address these issues during the 5-day council session. So I indicate to have asking my brother here, Casey Johnson, Delegate Casey Johnson, to, if he can modify the second motion party, Madam Eugene Charles Newton, I can indicate. Mr. Pro Tem Speaker, okay.
Thank you, Delegate Simpson. I'm not going to recognize the motion at this time for a couple reasons. One, and Manuel, can you pull the rule up right now on the consent schedule so I can read it for a moment? But as a matter of practice and custom, the council has only added items, for the most part, to the consent schedule that were posted on the agenda, and then has only included items on top of that, so ones that were not initially posted but added to the agenda after a motion had added them to the agenda. And that way, they've been read into the record, and then there's a second consideration of whether they'll be added to the consent schedule. So at this time, the chair's preference is that we vote on this motion to add the new items, develop the consent schedule with the existing items, and if you seek or desire to add those items to this consent schedule or have a second consent schedule, the chair will entertain the motion at that time. Thank you. And I'm going to read Rule 8, Order of Agenda Business, Item B. It says the chairperson of the standing committee shall prepare and submit a proposed agenda to the committee for review and final adoption. The agenda shall allow for the inclusion of a consent schedule, which is a listing of resolutions that will likely be approved by unanimous consent of the delegates in attendance. The consent schedule shall be developed with the chairperson upon request by any delegate with appropriate exhibits, reports, and other matter available for review prior to the meeting. Items shall be removed from the consent schedule on the request of any one committee member for any reason without debate. Items not removed shall be adopted by unanimous consent without amendments or debate. Removed items may be taken up either immediately after the consent schedule or placed later on the agenda at the discretion of the committee. I think the important item here is the consent schedule shall be developed by the chairperson upon request by any delegate with appropriate exhibits, reports, or other matter available for review prior to the meeting. All of the legislations that are available and that are being added at this time were emailed out over the past few days, including right up until this meeting today. So all of that information has been conveyed to the committee on what may be available. So at this time, the chair has Delegate Ricky Nez in the queue. Delegate Nez, Shanella, you're recognized.
Thank you, Pro Tem Chair Slater, Shanella. Honorable members of the 25th Navajo Nation Council's Naa'bik'iyati Committee. I do have a question for our legal counsel. My concern is I know that when you're conducting business for the Navajo Nation, whether it's meetings and signing off on documents and voting, is it that you have to be on the Navajo Nation in order to vote? That's what I would like to know. My question will go to our legal counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Nez. Ms. Bobroff, you heard the question. Can you please respond?
Here's a question. The short answer is that given that with telecommunications and such, as long as the committee meeting or council session is hosted in Window Rock, meaning that the meeting is coming from Window Rock, you have the staff there, you have a chair there, etc. That voting, telecommunicating voting, when you're not on the res, is allowable. The actual prohibition about signing documents on the res that actually only apply. The only statutory provision about that happens to be with the president, and that goes to him vetoing legislation. When he does that, he needs to be on the red. So, in short, you're good today. Back to you, speakers. Thank you.
Delegate Andy Nez, you're recognized.
Great, thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. After we vote on the First Amendment, I do want to acknowledge that Honorable Denny Simpson, if he desires to entertain the second consent, that his first reading did not include legislation 0045-23, which was added as part of the agenda for today by Delegate Johnson, and that is related to the authorization of mutual aid intergovernmental agreement between the Navajo Nation Public Safety as well as the City of Page. So in the event that he desires to do that consent agenda, to also include that if he wishes. Thank you.
Committee members, is there any further discussion on Amendment 1? Going twice? Ms. Cook, can we have a second reading of Amendment 1 and then proceed to roll call vote?
Yes, Amendment 1 is to add in legislations 0045-23, 0047-23, 0050-23, 0058-23, 0059-23, 0056-23, 0060-23, 0062-23, 0052-23, 0048-23, 0055-23, and 0061-23 are to be added to the agenda under Amendment 1. And then also to modify the amendment is to do a consent agenda for the items from the agenda of A, letter A through N, which would include legislation 0044-23, 0042-23, 0040-23, 0034-23, 0033-23, 0015-23, 0068-23, 0067-23, 0064-23, 0065-23, 0049-23, 0051-23, 0053-23, and legislation number 0054-23. Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Osi, can you please do a roll call vote on Amendment number 1?
I'll begin at 30 seconds. What do you want me to do now?
Well, there's all 4 of them, that's it, so go ahead.
Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo. Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. Honorable Lamardo Astoret and Honorable Brenda Jesus are excused. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton votes green via text. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati. Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati did not vote. Excuse me, Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati votes green via text. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Crowley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker, Crystalline Crowley votes green. Honorable Herman Daniels, how do you vote? Honorable Herman Daniels votes green via text. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez votes green. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green via text. Pro Tem Speaker Carl Slater is not voting. Honorable George Tolth, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolth votes green. Honorable Otto So, how do you vote? Honorable Otto So votes green via text. Honorable Curtis Unito, how do you vote? Honorable Curtis Unito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green. Going back up, Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo. Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. With 2 delegates excused, Pro Tem Speaker, you have 18 delegates who voted green for today, for this legislation. With Pro Tem Speaker Carl Slater not voting.
Thank you. 18 voted in the affirmative for Amendment 1 to the agenda, 0 opposed, a few not voting. Committee members, are there any further amendments to the agenda? Delegate Simpson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Pro Tem Speaker, members of the Naa'bik'iyati. Good morning, again. What you stated on the asking for modification from Delegate Casey Johnson, just need for clarification again, Mr. Pro Tem Speaker. Is that allowable, the new legislation that we just added to the agenda, am I allowed to make that amendment now to put those under consent agenda, to make that motion?
Yes, Delegate Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem Speaker. Washington da Kedo Kanda Shido Nation. Just wanted to commend all my colleagues that are up there right now advocating on behalf of Navajo Nation. Thank you so much, Ada. So I'd like to offer an amendment and here, so we'll give the opportunity for our delegates that are in DC now that are advocating for our Navajo Nation. And I think it's just out of courtesy to go ahead and move the new legislation that we're added to the agenda to the council, since all these agenda will be moving to the council so they can speak on these legislation next week during the 5-day spring session. So I'd like to make a motion to add, to put these under consent agenda. It'll be legislation 0045-23, 0050-23, 0058-23, 0059-23, 0056-23, 006-23, 0062-23, 0052-23, 0048-23, 0055-23, 0061-23. With that, Pro Tem Speaker, I'd like to make that motion. I didn't add legislation 0047-23. Reason being, the final action is by Naa'bik'iyati, Ada. So I didn't add that legislation. So I make that motion, Mr. Pro Tem Speaker and members of the Naa'bik'iyati Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Simpson. Committee members, for the sake of transparency, we're going to read the legislation titles for each of those legislations into the record, and then I'm going to ask if there's a second to the motion. Ms. Cook?
Legislation, Legislation 0045-23, an action relating to health, education, and human services, law and order, budget and finance, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Approving the authorization, the mutual aid intergovernmental agreement between the Navajo Nation Division of Public Safety, Navajo Police Department, and the City of Page, Arizona. Sponsor, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. Co-sponsor, Honorable Helena Naa'bik'iyati. Legislation number 0050-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, resource and development, health, education, and human services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Approving $2 million from the unreserved, undesignated fund balance, UUFB, for the 110 chapters summer 2023 youth employment programs, waiving 12 NNC Section 820E, Section 820F, Section 820J, and Section 820L to allow use of UUFB funds for recurring chapter expenses. Sponsor, Honorable Seth Damon. Co-sponsor, Honorable Casey Allen Johnson. Legislation number 0058-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, resource and development, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council. Approving $3,879,180 from the Sihasin Fund for a new Navajo Nation modular office building in Crown Point. Approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Co-sponsor, Honorable Norman N. Begay. Legislation 0059-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, resource and development, health, education, and human services, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council. Amending CAP-3918 to extend the Sihasin Fund's reversion deadline for the Navajo Technical University's Crown Point campus student housing expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Legislation number 0056-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, health, education, and human services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Approving the use of Title 4-E funds by the Navajo Division of Social Services. Sponsor, Honorable Andy Nez. Legislation 0060-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, health, education, and human services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Approving $863,570 from the Sihasin funds to the Office of Dene Youth to cover a funding shortfall for the Crown Point Youth Complex, approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Legislation 0062-23, an action relating to the health, education, and human services, budget and finance, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council. Approving $1,573,288 from the unreserved, undesignated fund balance to the Division of Social Services for a grant to St. Michael's Association for Special Education. Sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus. Co-sponsor, Honorable Andy Nez. Co-sponsor, Honorable Seth Damon. Legislation 0052-23, an act relating to the law and order, resource and development, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Amending 2 NNC Section 104 and 11 NNC Section 8B to prohibit council delegates from serving as board members and shareholders representatives for Navajo Nation-owned instrumentalities. Sponsor, Honorable Amber Knazba-Crotty. Co-sponsor, Honorable Seth Damon. Legislation 0048-23, an action relating to resource and development and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council. Confirming the appointment of Calvin Castillo as Division Director for the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. Co-sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus. Legislation 0055-23, an action relating to the resource and development, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council. Confirming the appointment of Stephen B. Etzity as Executive Director of the Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency. Sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus. Co-sponsor, Honorable Casey Allen Johnson. legislation 0061-23, an action relating to resource and development, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming Wilder Mike Halona as the Navajo Nation Division of Natural Resource Executive Director. Sponsor, Honorable Ricky Nez. Co-sponsor, Honorable Shauna Ann Claw. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cook. Committee members, is there a second to the... Thank you. We have a motion from Delegate Simpson and a second from Delegate Toth to provide the consent schedule for the legislations that were just read into the record. Is there any discussion on this, committee members? Going twice. There's no modification to the amendment, so we're going to go to a vote. Colleagues who are in the room, you'll be able to use your voting system, and colleagues on the line, we'll do a roll call for you in a moment. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna start. Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo? Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. And for the record, Honorable Lamardo Asseret and Honorable Brenda Jesus are excused. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay? Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Amber Canez Bacrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Canez Bacrati. Honorable Amber Canez Bacrati did not vote. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker did not vote. Honorable Seth Damon, how do you vote? Honorable Seth Damon votes green. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez votes green via text. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson. Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green. Honorable George Tolt, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolt. Honorable George Tolt votes green. Honorable Otto So, how do you vote? Honorable Otto So. Excuse me, Honorable Otto So is excused. Honorable Curtis Unito, how do you vote? Honorable Curtis Unito. Honorable Curtis Unito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie did not vote. Going back up, Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo. Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton votes green via text. Honorable Amber Kenneth Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth Bakrati votes green, or excuse me, votes red. Honorable Speaker Crystalline Crowley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker Crystalline Crowley. Madam Speaker Crystalline Crowley did not vote. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie did not vote. Madam Speaker Crystalline Crowley votes green via text, and Honorable Otto So votes green via text. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie also votes red via text. With that, Pro Tem Speaker, you have 16 delegates who voted green, 2 delegates who oppose, 2 delegates who are excused, and Pro Tem Chair Carl Slater not voting.
Thank you very much. Amendment number 2 passes to the agenda. Committee members? Delegate Crotty, you're recognized. Delegate Crotty going twice. Sorry, Delegate Crotty, we had you in the queue in error up here. Committee members, any further discussion on the agenda? Going twice? Going 3 times? Ms. Cook, can you read the agenda as amended into the record? And then, yeah, the second reading. And then Ms. Sosi will do a vote. Thank you.
Amendment 1 was to include legislations that were passed from the committee. Amendment 2 was to add legislations of that Amendment 1 to the consent agenda. The consent agenda for A would be legislation 0044-23, legislation 0042-23, legislation 0040-23, legislation 0034-23, legislation 33-23, legislation 0015-23, legislation 0068-23, legislation 0067-23, legislation 0064-23, legislation 0065-23, legislation 0049-23, legislation 0051-23, legislation 0053-23, legislation 0054-23, legislation 0045-23, legislation 0050-23, legislation 0058-23, legislation 0059-23, legislation 0056-23, legislation 0060-23, legislation 0062-23, legislation 0052-23, legislation 0048-23, legislation 0055-23, and legislation 0061-23 with the, legislation B would be legislation 0047-23. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Can you open up the vote for colleagues in here?
Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo? Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay? Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Excuse me, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton votes green. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati? Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati did not vote. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley votes green via text. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez did not vote. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez votes green via text. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota. Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green via text. Honorable George Tolth, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolth votes green. Honorable Otto So is excused. Honorable Curtis Unito, how do you vote? Honorable Curtis Unito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie did not vote. Going back up, Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati did not vote. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green via text. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green via text. For the record, Honorable Lamardo Aseret, Honorable Brenda Jesus, and Honorable Otto So are excused. With that, you have 16 delegates who voted in favor, 0 delegates who oppose, with Pro Tem Speaker Carl Slater not voting.
Thank you, committee members. We have an agenda before us, and staff will be sending that out soon, right? Yep. We'll move on to item 4, review and adopt the journals. We have a journal from March 23rd. It was sent out by Ms. Chi on April 7th at 9:50 a.m. and April 13th today at 10:09 a.m. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the journals. We have a motion from Delegate Simpson. Is there a second? We have a second from Delegate Johnson. Committee members, any discussion on the adoption of the journals? Hearing none, staff, can we move to a roll call vote and permitting the members in the room to vote using the equipment? This is the adoption of the journals from March 23rd, 2023.
Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo? Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton votes green. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati did not vote. Madam Speaker Crystalline Curley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker Crystalline Curley did not vote. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green via text. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez votes green via text. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green via text. Honorable George Tolth, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolth votes green. Honorable Curtis Unito, how do you vote? Honorable Curtis Unito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green via text. And going back up, Honorable Stephen Arvizo, how do you vote? Honorable Stephen Arvizo? Honorable Stephen Arvizo did not vote. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay? Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati? Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati did not vote. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley votes green via text. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish? Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. For the record, Honorable Lamardo Astaret, Brenda Jesus, and Otto So are excused. With that, Honorable Stephen Arvizo also votes green via text. Oh, excuse me, he's present in the chambers. With that, Pro Tem Chair, you have 17 delegates who voted in favor, 0 who opposed, with Pro Tem Chair Carl Slater not voting.
Thank you, Ms. Sosi. Committee members, the March 23rd Journal is adopted, 17 in favor, 0 opposed. We're going to move on to item 5A, report from Office of the President and Vice President and Department of Personnel Management on the Navajo Nation General and Minimum Wage. Report provided by staff of Office of the President and Vice President and the Navajo Department of Personnel Management. I believe we have the staff in the chamber. If you could come up to this area right here and we'll turn your mics on. Committee members, give us a moment.
Good morning, honorable members of the Navajo Nation Council as the Naa'bik'iyati Committee. My name is Patrick Sandoval, the Chief of Staff for the Office of the President and Vice President. Happy to be here with you. Happy to accompany our Division Director, Ms. Debbie Nez Manuel, and we are prepared to give you a report on the specific items that have been requested. There have been some previous discussion between certain levels of the council and our programs and our division. So as indicated earlier, I am happy to assure that we're prepared to give you the best report that we can today on the subjects listed. Let me allow Ms. Manuel, Division Director, to introduce herself.
Yate, she Sanjikin and Shlin Selna Bethany, Bushes Chin, Sitna Jenny Dasha Chate, Kabahan Dashnala, Clay Twat, Dan Ayusadat Nasha. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here to help provide the necessary responses that were being asked from our last meeting. Thank you for inviting us here today.
Okay, you want us to continue with the report then on the subject? No? Secret name. Okay. Honorable Pro Tem Speaker, we will begin. In a previous meeting with the Division of Human Resources and Office of Personnel Management, there were a number of questions asked about a couple of items, and so per a report that's been drafted, I'd like to go ahead and read off that report to the Navajo Nation Council. It's written to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee from Thomasita Woody, and she is on the line? Okay. Thomasita, are you with us? Okay, Thomasita, would you like to go ahead and read the report, or do you want Division Director or myself to do it?
I can do that.
Okay, I'm going to allow her to do that, so hopefully everybody can hear her, because I can barely hear her.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Can I share the my report on the screen?
should be available to share.
Thank you. Yate bene she Thomas Itawari and Shia. What's on the edge dot kabaha bashes chain kia on a dash chados and not Jenny dash another. Originally from Steamboat Canyon, and been with the division for a little bit over a year and a half, and had the opportunity to sit here and do my best to be transparent in my responsibilities here at DPM. So the report that I've prepared for the Naa'bik'iyati committee is dated for today, and it's written for from DPM. So let me go ahead and read this verbatim and put this on record. On April 3, the Department of Personnel Management had an opportunity to present before the Law and Order Committee, the Health Education and Human Services Committee and its members. During the meeting, questions about compensation became the focal point of the presentation. The DPM prepared responses with attachments for your consideration. First and foremost, it is vitally important to understand that all efforts produced within the Division of Human Resources are to apply best practices while creating changes that promote quality of life for personnel. These practices are universal in human resource management and responsibility, or organizational management. Organizations and agencies have the utmost responsibility to be strong stewards of financial resources. This means the Navajo Nation administrative divisions will regularly acquire an extensive compensation study that will guide decisions for all bodies within the organization. Additionally, being stewards requires management to complete necessary research, review, and collaboration in decision process, and ultimately implement the action plan. Below are relevant responses to questions. Number 1, what is the plan to address the Navajo Nation wage issue, such as increasing wages and implementing a minimum wage for Navajo Nation employees? Letter A, DPM response. You'll see the attachment. I've included the DPM compensation overview report that was submitted to both the committees. Letter I, considerations for the Navajo Nation to adopt minimum wage rests within the authority of the Navajo Nation Council. 2, as of April 10, DPM is advertising a request for proposal to complete a 2023 comprehensive compensation study. The attachment is also with this report. DPM's primary reason to conduct a new comprehensive compensation study fulfills its fiduciary responsibility, which will help analyze the current job market post-pandemic, knowing there are significant changes since 2019, pre-pandemic. With the guidance and direction of OPVP, it is recommended to ensure considerations are made with the various public, private sectors of the Navajo Nation. While the government may work in collaboration with the Navajo Nation Council, there are considerable opportunities to work in collaboration on a national level to leverage resources aimed at supporting a variety of businesses. These partnerships can increase the economy to support the intended minimum wage plan in the coming year. Meanwhile, the vision is to implement the minimum wage to $13 an hour with the support of the authority of the Navajo Nation governing bodies, while keeping in mind these neighboring state minimum wage laws in determining a realistic value for the Navajo Nation. Second page, number 2, the plan to fund $19 million revealed by the 2019 MGT Comprehensive Compensation Study. Again, every organization has the fiduciary responsibility to ensure a fair and equitable compensation study is conducted. We are being good stewards, and we like to see this to be accomplished. Thank you. And this concurred by Division Director Debbie Manuel. Is there any questions? Just so you are aware, attachments are included, which is the DPM compensation report and the RFP comprehensive compensation study. So we just began the RFP process. And I believe the report was sent to Mr. Manuel Rico for distribution. Thank you.
Chief of Staff, does that conclude your report?
That concludes the report. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Committee members, that report was emailed out to you at 11:05 a.m. Before we move forward, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the report. A motion from Delegate Damon, second from Delegate Arvizo. Committee members, questions, discussion on the report? Delegate Toth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Pro Tem Speaker, and again, thank you for presenting your topic in regards to the salary increase. We appreciate that, and the only one question I have, if you're gonna come out with minimum wage for Navajo Nation, I believe it requires a legislation. Anybody is sponsoring that? So that would be my question. Idi and Naa'bik'iyati. Thank you, Chair.
There's no one in the queue right now, so Chief of Staff, you're recognized to respond.
Ms. Thomasita Woody, I believe in your presentation, we did not talk about sponsorship of any legislation at this moment, but when that becomes necessary, we will certainly reach out to the Navajo Nation Council for sponsorship, and sounds to me like George Tolt is ready to go, the Honorable George Tolt.
Delegate Toth, we have Delegate Yazzie in the queue, so we're going to go to Delegate Sherilyn Yazzie, then you can ask your follow-up thereafter. Delegate Sherilyn Yazzie? Yes.
Been concerned about our small businesses on Navajo Nation. A lot of small businesses aren't able to really pay that minimum wage, and how would they be considered and thought about when they go into this type of legislation that George Toll and Nathan Nota want to pass right now. This is really going to affect all the businesses, not just the small ones, and also Navajo Nation. And I do understand the importance of, this request for our, public safety and all of Navajo Nation employees, but are we considering any kind of wage study that's going to, I guess, impact the entire nation and all the businesses, the large ones and the small ones? If that's the case, I'd like to see that kind of study before anything actually comes to legislation. Thank you.
Delegate Toth, you're recognized to ask your follow-up.
Okay, thank you again, Pro Tem Speaker. I believe this is a very, very important request that we're making. So, because it's been over a long time, we have an increase, and we need to establish our minimum wage salary so we can, people can start applying for the position that it's being vacancy. So I would ask the Legislative Council to start drafting the request for me sponsoring Mr. Toth and co-sponsored by Nathan Nota, and I will work with the our attorneys to draft that information for us. So I'll be willing to sponsor that, because it's been over a long time. trying to hire people even so area this pro temp speaker. So I'll have the attorney start working on, then we can have a discussion through the standing committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Toth. I just want to remind the committee that there is a protocol for submitting and dropping legislation requests, and nothing that is articulated on the record right now is accepted as dropping legislation. Additionally, there is already a request in, I've been informed by Legislative Counsel, for minimum wage legislation, and so anyone who is seeking to also work on that legislation will have to work with the sponsor, and that's something that does not take place as a discussion item within a report on the Navajo Nation Council Naa'bik'iyati Committee. Committee members, are there any further questions? Oh, we have Delegate Simonson in the queue, and then follow up by Delegate Sherilyn Yazzie. Delegate Simonson, Shatui, you're recognized.
Oh, yeah, Chase, Speaker Pro Tem, Mr. Slater, thank you. And I just also want to add to Delegate Sherilyn Yazzie's comment that you absolutely need to consider what your minimum wage will do to folks who own and operate small businesses, Navajo-operated small businesses, especially if they are independent and, just have one of those small businesses. There's a whole variety, and I feel like oftentimes business operations and ownerships and small businesses at that are not fully understood because there's so few on Navajo, and this is one of the reasons, and there are many reasons why there's so few. I just recall years back when the state of Arizona did a minimum wage increase and what it did to the very small independent businesses in Flagstaff. There are many that went out of business, but also what happened is the cost of food in restaurants and increased is what happened. And so I think you really have to think out all the consequences, and certainly it would be great to offer increases and salary, and if the Navajo Nation government can't afford that, that certainly I certainly support that. But then when you talk about you can't put everyone in one category, and you're going to have to really think about the small businesses, and especially those, and there's certainly some businesses across Navajo, say the C-stores. A lot of C-stores are owned and operated by other companies, and they own multiple stores. And and those folks might fare, and they might be able to afford that kind of increase. But if you really need to compare that to somebody who just owns, one business, but, and that's it. So just want to put that comment in there, and that would be hopefully the folks who were drafting the legislation for minimum wage is, taking all those things into consideration. So thank you.
Delegate Sherilyn Yazzie, you're recognized.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, everybody. So I guess I want to know a little bit more information about, past wage studies, what it looked like, how it impacted, how it impacts all our Navajo employees, but also the rest of the community, and how, because again, one of the things is, we want to be able to, small business, we want to be able to employ our relatives, local economy by Navajo. And part of that is also including your small businesses and helping them to reach those levels to where they're able to be sustainable on their own. But if, we're going to start passing legislation that covers all of Navajo, all of the small businesses, no matter if you're small, medium, or large, then you're not going to be equitable to everybody.
Delegate Yazzie, does that conclude your remarks? Her call dropped? Okay. We don't have anyone else in the queue right now, so Chief of Staff, I'm going to go back to you. You're recognized.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker Pro Tem. To the Honorable Delegates, Mr. George Tolth and Nathan Nota, and the Honorable Delegates Sherilyn Yazzie and Delegate Simonson. We are a new administration, but not new to the situation we're discussing. Our report is actually going to be new, and we are going to make every attempt to assure that every aspect of this matter is discussed. I'll be working with Legislative Council, our legal people, to make sure that we understand what all the impacts are in every direction. We need to understand that the Navajo Nation does not have a fully developed economy, and so we need to understand how that works both positively and negatively. And to Delegate George Tolth, we want to sit down and have a discussion so that we all understand the aspects, and probably even to the extent of a listening session with small businesses across Navajo. Because again, if we move with this really quickly, we have to truly understand where are the funding coming from to pay for the study, to if we as a government are going to assist those small businesses to help meet the new requirements of new wages. And in this situation, does big business, meaning corporations and well-established, do they just get bigger and does small business fall apart and end up having to lay off people? So we really want to make sure that this is thorough, and we want to have a full discussion as it relates to that. The last time that this was on the council's agenda, the Honorable Council Delegate Vince James was unsuccessful in garnering support for it. So we want to make sure that if we do move forward with both a wage increase and the establishment of a minimum wage on Navajo, that it makes sense and it's good for everybody. The Navajo Nation, working with the Small Business Administration in the United States, from the United States government, again, we've got to talk with them to see how these impacts happen, because we truly need to understand that no matter how much we pay, no matter how much we generate, a percentage, it's high, 89, 90% of it ends up leaving the Navajo Nation anyway. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the right timing, in the right fashion, and we're good with all of the stuff. As a matter of fact, the states that we're comparing ourselves to, Arizona and New Mexico, those are multi-billion-dollar operations and economies that we're talking about. So I just want to assure everybody that this administration, our division director, and our personnel will not move forward without full discussion with potential sponsors, people who are going to have to vote on this, and with our legal counsel and legislators' legal counsel as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. Committee members, we don't have anyone in the queue at this time. Any further comments or discussion on the report? Delegate Tolth, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate for that time. Also, the rest of the Naa'bik'iyati on the line and also at the meeting. Well, Mr. Sandoval, that's a good recommendation. We'll go ahead and sit down, do some more study before we take any action, and concur by Mr. Nota. So we'd like to set a date, and so we can talk about it, study it, and we'll go from there. Okay? Thank you, Chair.
Committee members, any further discussion on the report? Delegate Yazzie, is that what you said? Delegate Sherilyn Yazzie, you're recognized.
Thank you again. I do appreciate the idea to really start listening to our small businesses and the owners would be considered for this listening session. So I am in favor of that. So thank you.
Delegate Yanito, you're recognized. Going twice. Delegate Yanito.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yateo here all the 25th council. Gonna go, you know, Zonchi, wages that it's kind of scary because it can affect a lot of areas and it based on all use in the and then I know that you guys we did a study with Arizona and New Mexico, indicating that they're really in a good standing with their economy. According here to Utah, just like everything still minimum wage is still really low. A lot of times when this minimum wage stages, the department they put a lot of money into the projects. Even there's a difference, and so there's a lot of success in a lot of areas with projects without in the departments. And then with the Navajo Nation, there's a lot of complaints. There's Haji or stage no, and closed no. And then there's always like 2 hours early delays and afternoon. Day off, Fridays off, need that all you go. Is this individual like that, that works for the department, do they get paid for like early leaves or something like that? And go job performance stuff. I think we need to study that and look into it. Because if you're really going to increase your wages, you got to consider those kind of questions, and I get beat up on a lot of those subjects from my constituents. I just want to probably need to ask a question on how our job descriptions are as far as description evaluation change.
Delegate Johnson, you're recognized.
Yeah, Pro Tem Chair Carl Slater. Just want to first and foremost thank the Office of the President, the Vice President, and Department of Personnel Management on your report. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this is a very important discussion. I'm very thankful that you're here to report to us today. And right now we have over 1,000 plus jobs vacancies, and I know this is going to take a little bit more time and collective discussions on this. I really think that we need to consider this increasing the minimum wage. We have a lot of qualified and educated young Diné citizens out there wanting to come home and work and provide for their families. They want to be able to, build. They also want to, work here and be closer to their families. And we have a really unique family where we take care of one another and take care of our relatives and our livestock, and we have a sense of belonging here. So I really would like to work with you on this and moving this forward, and also the dialogue and discussion with my honorable colleagues that that are concerned about business, the businessmen and businesswomen, and we also need to improve that as well. You know, our Navajo economy, you know, we need to really work together, you know, collectively on improving that as well. So I just want to state that comment and just let you know that, you know, looking forward to our work sessions with you, and, you know, let's continue to, you know, provide quality pay for our Diné people out there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we had a couple questions from Delegate Yanito. So, Chief of Staff, Mr. Sandoval, you're recognized to respond.
Thanks again to the Honorable Delegate Yanito to address your question. Again, we want to be understanding in your observation of the expenditure of dollars by programs, also the delays that we have. To answer your question more specifically, yes, these employees are paid from whatever branch that they're in when there is a delay in work for whatever reasons that are brought forth, and their regular hourly salaries are paid as administrative leave. And so I'd like to ask Delegate Ninito to understand that at the time this administration entered the government, there was a lot of inclement weather happening, which we're happy for, but we try to understand the safety of the employees too by not all being out there at the same time everybody else is getting off at the same time, the road conditions, the quality of their vehicles, and so forth. So understand that we are aware of that, and the President has given us instructions to begin to look at a better process for when and how we release workers. And his most important point is constituent services. Somebody may have an appointment schedule at 3:30, 4 o'clock, at 8:30, and yet we make an arbitrary call to let people not be there, but yet the client may still try to be at their 8:30 appointment, their 3:30 appointment, when the nation has left for the day. So that being a primary concern for him, as well as the cost that's incurred every time we release somebody, we want to make sure that we come up with a program. It's going to take a little time, but maybe it's by zones or categories or whatever, because weather may be not good in Window Rock, but the sun may be shining in Eastern Agency and there's no weather at all. So please understand that President Nygren has given us clear instructions to come up with a better system of managing those situations. Delegate Yanito? And let me move on to the question by the Honorable Delegate Johnson. We are very appreciative for the thank you, sir, on the subject related to working with the legislative branch. And I would like to update you, and I think that my numbers are right. The Navajo Nation has the capacity to employ around 6,000 people, and we believe the vacancies is around 2,000 right now. So we're working with 2/3 of the workforce, and we're thinking long and wide on this to how do we solve this issue. I promise you that people with the Office of Personnel Management, Division of Human Resources, as well as the other divisions are coming up with ways that we can address this as soon as possible. I will acknowledge that part of our problem for both people who are not young and educated and upcoming, but people that are, willing to still work, we have a housing crisis. So we're also coming to council next week. The President will be talking to you guys about those crises and how do we work together to bring it to resolve. But we do have that housing crisis. We acknowledge that our salaries are, in a lot of cases, non-competitive with surrounding or even people in Phoenix when it's the same job. We understand that people nowadays it's a different generation, so their definition of a quality of life may not be what it was 30 or even 50 years ago. So we've got to begin to understand how do we accommodate them and work with them and build capacity so that there is a park, there is a coffee shop, there is a movie theater, there is some form of entertainment. So we are thinking about that as well. We're doing our best to understand what an economy actually is, the various sectors of manufacturing and industry and so on, and what is it that can work best where based on locations of interstates and railroads and internet capacities and so on. So that's to acknowledge the Honorable Delegate Johnson. Thank you.
Committee members, any further discussion on the report? Andy Nez. Delegate Andy Nez, you're recognized.
Thank you. Honorable Chair Pro Tem Slater, as well as our presenters there this afternoon. So I just wanted to just make a comment as an alternative to what the projected comprehensive study will, after it's conducted, and what, the alternative routes that may be accomplished thereafter. Because right now, we certainly can't make a lot of those projections until the comprehensive study is complete. But I do want to recognize that the party does consider alternatives in the event that the Navajo Nation is unable to commit to the hiring of all 6,000 plus positions at the capacity that they're allotted based on what the projected study will declare. And I do want to recognize that we do also have many temporary workers. We also have summer youth employers who should deserve the same pay grade, as well as incentivizing our employees who are currently working with the Navajo Nation. Currently, there is none. Because I speak from experience myself. Many of our employees get their step increases until 20, 30 years later, and many of them build their credentials while they're in school, while they're employed. And part of that is also being in school. I, for example, was working with the Navajo Nation, built my credentials, and just furthered my education, but unfortunately was unable to be appreciated in a way where you tell us these things to go off and get an education, come back to school, and do these things. And so we mark them off our to-do list, and to be able to accomplish that, we come back to the Navajo Nation only to not be incentivized or appreciated to a certain degree. And for me, that's, that was quite concerning. But at the same time, I was okay. I was humbled by the experience and just being able to do that for myself. But I know for many of our other Navajo Nation employees, many of them have done that and still continue not to feel those appreciation from our Navajo Nation as a staff. And many of them have committed 30, 40 years to the Navajo Nation, still unable to see a lot of that growth coming from the Navajo Nation. And the other thing I do want to mention is that considering some of these positions to be virtual, especially when we talk about our PIO positions, when we look at the Department of Health, I feel that many of these positions can also be diverted into the virtual space where they're able to work from home, whether they're living in Albuquerque, whether they're living in New York City, that their expertise is also needed here on the Navajo Nation, and I think many of them can commit to that through the virtual space. You don't have to respond. I just wanted to make a comment just in lieu of looking further after the study is complete and some of the alternatives that should be taking place as these studies are being conducted. Thank you.
Committee members, any further discussion or comment on the report? Going twice. Going three times. Can we do a vote on item 5A?
Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay? Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati. Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati did not vote. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley did not vote. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez. Honorable Rick Nez did not vote. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota. Honorable Nathan Nota did not vote. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green via text. Honorable George Tolt, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolt votes green. Honorable Curtis Unito, how do you vote? Honorable Curtis Unito. Honorable Curtis Unito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green. Going back up, Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati. Honorable Amber Canez Bakrati did not vote. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker, Crystalline Curley votes green via text. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez votes green via text. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. For the record, Honorable Lamardo Asarat, Brenda Jesus, and Otto So are excused. With that, you have 16 delegates who voted in favor, 0 who opposed, with Pro Tem Chair Carl Slater not voting. Honorable Norman Begay votes green, and that changes the vote to 17 delegates who voted in favor, 0 delegates who oppose, with Pro Tem Chair Honorable Carl Slater not voting.
Thank you, committee members, and thank you, Chief of Staff, Mr. Sandoval. Thank you, Division Director Nez Manuel, for the presentation, and to Ms. Woody for the presentation as well. Committee members, we're going to move on to item 6, old business, none. Item 7, new business, consent agenda A. Ms. Cook, can you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Consent agenda. Item A, legislation 0044-23, an action relating to resource and development, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, adopting the latest international building codes, ICC's 2021 International Building Code, as applicable to commercial and government buildings constructed by the Navajo Nation government and its entities and political subdivisions. Sponsor, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. This legislation is Navajo Nation Council final authority. At council, per Navajo Nation Council rules of order, the legislation will be read into the record by electronic reading. Next legislation is 0042-23, an action relating to health, education, and human services, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the appointment of Debbie Nez Manuel as the Executive Director for the Division of Human Resources. Sponsor, Honorable Vince R. James. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council, and at that time, per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order, legislation will be read into the record by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0040-23, an act relating to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the nominations of the Speaker of the Navajo Nation Council and the Navajo Nation President to the Navajo Eastern Land Commission. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council. And per Navajo Nation Council Rule of Order 9, legislation will be read into the record by electronic voice recording. This legislation is sponsored by Honorable Speakers Chrislyn Curley. Legislation number 0034-23, an act relating to the Resource and Development, Law and Order, Budget and Finance, Naa'bik'iyati Committees, and Navajo Nation Council, approving $1,500,000 from the Hot Tourism Fund for the Navajo Tourism Department, amending 24 NNC Section 741 to allow revenue in the Hot Tourism Fund to be used by all Navajo Nation programs for tourism-related purposes, and rescinding Resolution Number CS-45-22. The sponsors, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council. At the Navajo Nation Council, per Standing Rules of Order 9, legislation will be read into the record by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0033-23, an act relating to Resource and Development, Health, Education, Human Services, Law and Order Committee, Budget, Finance, and Naa'bik'iyati Committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, establishing the San Juan River Mitigation Fund, directing that monies received from In Regards Gold King Mine release in San Juan County, Colorado, on August 15, 2015, in 0118MD-02824 DNM, and underlying and related actions be deposited in the San Juan River Mitigation Fund after reimbursement of litigation costs. This legislation is sponsored by Honorable Ricky Nez and moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council. Per Standing Rules of Order 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0015-23, an action relating to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee, supporting the proposal to amend the Constitution of New Mexico to provide for the creation of an independent redistricting commission to develop redistricting plans for congressional districts, state legislative districts, and the districts of other district state offices. The sponsors, Honorable George H. Toth. This legislation, Naa'bik'iyati, is final authority, and per Standing Rules of Order, the legislation has been read into the record by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0068-23, an action relating to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee and the Navajo Nation Council, approving the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Herman M. Daniels Jr.'s Delegate Regions. Chapters, Tsepakin, Navajo Mountain, Shanto, Oljeto. Sponsor is Honorable Herman M. Daniels. Co-sponsor, Honorable Chrislyn Curley. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council, and at that time, this legislation will be read in its entirety per Standing Rule Order 9 by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0067-23, an action relating to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee and the Navajo Nation Council, approving the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Nothan Nata's Delegate Region. Chapters, Coyote Canyon, Mexican Springs, Noshchity, Tohatchee, and Bahasla. Sponsor, Honorable Nathan Nota. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council, and at that time, per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order, the legislation will be read its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0064-23, an action relating to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee and the Navajo Nation Council approving the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Shundeen Parish's Delegate Region, Chapters Chilchinbito, Denahotso, Kienta. The sponsor is Honorable Shundeen Parish. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council, and per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0065-23, an action relating to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee and the Navajo Nation Council, amending CD-68-22 and the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Delegate Region Project Plan for Honorable Andy Nez, PhD's Delegate Region, Chapters Crystal, Fort Defiance, Red Lake, Sawmill. Sponsor Honorable Andy Nez. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9, the legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0049-23, an action relating to law and order and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the appointment of Ethel B. Branch as the Navajo Nation Attorney General. The sponsor is Honorable Casey Allen Johnson, co-sponsor Honorable Helena Naa'bik'iyati, co-sponsor Honorable Stephen R. Arvizo. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority. Per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9, the legislation will be read into the record by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0051-23, an act relating to law and order and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, rescinding CJA-01-18, relating to agreements not requiring Navajo Nation Council or committee approval to provide for transparency and accountability. Sponsor Honorable Amber Knazba-Crotty, co-sponsor Honorable Seth Damon. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9, the legislation will be read into the record in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0053-23, an action relating to law and order and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, enacting the Navajo Nation Victims' Rights Act of 2023, amending Title 17 of the Navajo Nation Code. Sponsor Honorable Amber Knazba-Crotty, co-sponsor Honorable Helena Naa'bik'iyati, co-sponsor Honorable Seth Damon. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council and as final authority, and at that time, per Navajo Nation Rule 9, the legislation will be read into the record in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0054-23, an action relating to law and order and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, amending 2 Navajo Nation Code, Section 852, to increase the Navajo Hopi Land Commission membership to add representation for the Chilchimbito community. Sponsor Honorable Otto So, co-sponsor Honorable Seth Damon. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, per Navajo Nation Rules of Order, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0045-23, an action relating to health, education, human services, law and order, budget and finance, and Naa'bik'iyati committees. Please excuse the typo. It does have "and the Navajo Nation Council." However, Naa'bik'iyati Committee is final authority for this legislation. It is approving the authorization, the mutual aid intergovernmental agreement between the Navajo Nation Division of Public Safety, Navajo Police Department, and the City of Page, Arizona. Sponsor Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, co-sponsor Honorable Helena Naa'bik'iyati. Naa'bik'iyati Committee is the final authority, and this legislation has been read into the record per Standing Rules of Order 9 and by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0050-23, an action relating to budget and finance, resource and development, health, education, and human services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $2 million from the unreserved undesignated fund balance, UUFB, for the 110 chapters summer 2023 youth employment programs, waiving 12 Navajo Nation Code Section 820E, Section 820F, Section 820J, and Section 820L to allow use of UUFB funds for reoccurring chapter expenses. The sponsor is Honorable Seth Damon, co-sponsor Casey Allen Johnson. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0058-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, resource development, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $3,879,180 from the Sihasin Fund for a new Navajo Nation modular office building in Crown Point, approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson, co-sponsor, Honorable Norman M. Begay. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9. Legislation 0059-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, resource and development, health, education, and human services, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, amending CAP-39-18 to extend the Sihasin Fund's reversion deadline for the Navajo Technical University's Crown Point campus student housing expenditure plan. This legislation is sponsored by Honorable Danny Simpson. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Orders 9. Legislation 0056-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, health, education, and human services, and Naa'bik'iyati committees and the Navajo Nation Council, approving the use of Title 4E funds by the Navajo Division of Social Services. Sponsor, Honorable Andy Nez. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council, and per Navajo Nation Rules of Order 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording at that time. Legislation 0060-23, an action relating to the budget and finance, health, education, and human services, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $863,570 from the Sihasin Fund to the Office of Diné Youth to cover a funding shortfall for the Crown Point Youth Complex, approving the related expenditure plan. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording per Navajo Nation Rules of Order 9. Legislation 0062-23, an action relating to the health, education, and human services, budget, finance, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving $1,573,288 from the unreserved undesignated fund balance to the Division of Social Services for a grant to St. Michael's Association for Special Education. Sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus, co-sponsor Andy Nez, Honorable Andy Nez, co-sponsor Honorable Seth Damon. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0052-23, an act relating to the law and order, resource and development, Naa'bik'iyati committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, amending 2 NNC Section 104 and 11 NNC Section 8B to prohibit council delegates from serving as board members and shareholders representatives for Navajo Nation-owned instrumentalities. This legislation is sponsored by Honorable Amber Knazba-Crotty, co-sponsor Honorable Seth Damon. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council and per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording at that time. Legislation 0048-23, an action relating to the Resource and Development and Naa'bik'iyati Committees and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the appointment of Calvin Castillo as Division Director for the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development. Sponsors, Honorable Danny Simpson, co-sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus. This legislation moves forward to the Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and at that time, per Navajo Nation Council Rule 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety at that time, by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0055-23, an action relating to the Resource and Development, Naa'bik'iyati Committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the appointment of Stephen B. City as Executive Director of the Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency. Sponsor, Honorable Brenda Jesus. Co-sponsor, Honorable Casey Allen Johnson. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and per Navajo Nation Council Rules of Order 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording. Legislation 0061-23, an action relating to Resource and Development, Naa'bik'iyati Committees, and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming Wilder Mike Halona as the Navajo Nation Division of Natural Resources Executive Director. This legislation is sponsored by Honorable Ricky Nez, co-sponsor Honorable Shauna Ann Claw. This legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council as final authority, and per Navajo Nation Rules of Order 9, this legislation will be read in its entirety by electronic voice recording at that time. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Good morning, actually good afternoon, colleagues, members of the 25th Navajo Nation Naa'bik'iyati Committee. Thank you very much, all of those colleagues here in the chambers, and then those that are there online. This is Honorable Seth Damon. I've been delegated to take over and preside over the Naa'bik'iyati Committee at this time. With that, colleagues, we are on the consent agenda items under 7A, new business. There's 25 legislations that have been read into the record either electronically or will be done electronically through the motion. At this time, colleagues, from the approving of the consent or approving of the agenda this morning that was taken precedent already, there was a motion and a second to allocate a consent agenda. And at this time, that's what we're considering under item number A. So with that, colleagues, I'll go to the floor. At this time, is there a motion? Motion by Honorable Casey Allen Johnson. Is there a second? Second by Honorable Danny Simpson. With that, colleagues, with the amendment to the agenda, we'll go ahead and go to the board on the consent agenda items at this time. We could go ahead and run the horn. Roll call.
Honorable Stephen Arvizo, votes green. Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay, votes green. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton also votes green via text. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw did not vote. Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati votes red via text. Madam Speaker, Crystalline Crowley votes green via text. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James. Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green via text. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez. Honorable Rick Nez votes green via text. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green via text. Honorable Carl Slater, how do you vote? Honorable Carl Slater. Honorable Carl Slater did not vote. Honorable George Tolth, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolth votes green. Honorable Curtis Yanito, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolth votes green. Excuse me, Honorable Curtis Yanito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes red. Going back up. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Carl Slater, how do you vote? Honorable Carl Slater is excused. With that, Pro Tem Chair, you have Honorable Lamardo Aseret, Honorable Brenda Jesus, Honorable Carl Slater, and Honorable Otto So, who are excused. 16 delegates who voted in favor, 2 delegates who opposed, with Pro Tem Chair Honorable Seth Damon not voting.
Thank you very much for that. With that, colleagues, we have 16 in favor, 2 opposed, and chair not voting. And with the individuals that sit in the gallery, the legislations that have passed, or with the vote of the Naa'bik'iyati committee, they have passed. All those legislations will be moved forward to the Navajo Nation Council next week. So thank you very much for being in attendance, and thank you very much, colleagues, for taking action on those 25 legislations. With that, colleagues, we're moving on down to item number B, legislation 0047-23. This legislation is sponsored by Honorable Danny Simpson. With that, could we get it read into the record, and then we'll go ahead and I'll go to the floor and ask for a motion in a second.
Okay. Legislation 0047-23. This legislation is an action relating to resource and development and Naa'bik'iyati committees, confirming the appointment of Chico Charlie as the Executive Director for the Office of Navajo Telecommunications Regulatory Commission. Sponsor, Honorable Danny Simpson. This legislation, Naa'bik'iyati Committee is final authority. This legislation was posted to the 5-day comment period on March 31st, 2023, and ended on April 5th, 2023. There was no comment supporting this resolution, no comments opposing this resolution, and there was no recommendations for this resolution. Legislation. This legislation went before the Resource and Development Committee on April 12th, 2023. There was a due pass with no amendments, and it was therefore forward to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee. This Naa'bik'iyati Committee is the final authority, and per Navajo Nation Standing Rules of Order 9, this legislation has been read into the record by electronic voice recording. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I just want to go ahead and, for clarification, as well as in the last motion, before I go ahead and move on to this next motion, I just want to put on the record that legislation 0015-23, that was sponsored by Honorable George Tolth, that legislation was final authority here at Naa'bik'iyati Committee. Legislation 0045-23 was also final authority, and that legislation was sponsored by Madam Chair Charles Newton, co-sponsored by Honorable Landon Naa'bik'iyati. And then last but not least, legislation confirming the executive director that we're going back to on this discussion, legislation 0047-23, the final authority for this legislation 0047-23 is here at Naa'bik'iyati Committee. So with that, colleagues, on this legislation that we hear. I do have the sponsor here within the Navajo Nation Council chambers. Could I get a motion? Motion by Honorable Arvizo, by the most distinguished gentleman from Yumbato. With that, is there a second? Second by Honorable Helena Naa'bik'iyati. As always, she looks wonderful this morning in her outfit. Good morning. With that, colleagues, any comments, questions? I don't have anybody in the queue, nobody on the board. Going twice. Final authority for legislation 0047-23 is here at Naa'bik'iyati Committee. Going 3 times. That, colleagues, let's go to the board on legislation 0047-23. If you're on the floor, go ahead and use your green buttons, red buttons. We don't have any orange buttons or yellow buttons. Colleagues, if you're on the line, we'll go ahead and read out the roll call. Around the horn, let's vote.
Honorable Norman Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay. Honorable Norman Begay did not vote. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Norman Begay votes green. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Knez-Bakrati votes green via text. Madam Speaker Crystalline Crowley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker Crystalline Crowley votes green via text. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez did not vote. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez votes green via text. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green. Honorable George Tolt, how do you vote? Honorable George Tolt votes green. Honorable Curtis Unito, how do you vote? Honorable Curtis Unito. Honorable Curtis Unito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green via text. Going back up, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green via text. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish. Honorable Shandine Parrish did not vote. For the record, Honorable Lamaro Asuret, Brenda Jesus, Carl Slater, and Otto So are excused. With that, Pro Tem Chair, you have 17 delegates who voted in favor, 0 delegates who opposed, with Pro Tem Chair Honorable Seth Damon not voting.
Thank you very much, colleagues. With that, with the vote on legislation 0043-23, 17 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting, motion carries. That, colleagues, that legislation, again, 0043-47-23 is final authority here at Naa'bik'iyati Committee. With that, colleagues, we have completed the items under new business. I'll go on down to item number 8, close the meetings, announcements, and then adjournment. this time, colleagues, is there any announcements? I don't have anybody in the queue. I do have Honorable Herman Daniels. Jay, floor is yours.
Thank you. Kudo success can kudo Speaker Damon kudo here. Kudo shanat shenigi kudo I see to Nahens and kudo Greggy nice Thaniki Aronana kudo Nagadam Dahosh Negi lo Aronana his staff lo I see here but additional do Aron here got it I Miss Barboff. Thank you. I see here kudo and your staff too in the Legislative Council office. Thank you very much. Next week, I know there's a special session, not spring session, spring session. On the 19th, Utah Tribal Leaders Meeting, Salt Lake City. So I'll be going that way to attend the Utah Tribal Leaders Meeting next week on the 19th. So there's 8 tribes in Utah, and Navajo Nation were one of the 8 that we have our meetings. Quarterly, every 3 months. Every year we have meeting with the governor of Utah. So last week I took a trip up to Washington State, Oregon, tour called large scale farming. So other than that, I have a legislation that is going to be on the spring session's agenda, but I requested for not to be on the special session agenda, which is legislation 0025, I believe was. There's the purchase of Gouldings. It's not going to be on the agenda, but I'm requesting for a tour and a meet at Gouldings at the property. So May 1st, I believe it was. We're aiming for May 1st. So at the same time, I'm thinking about having an introductory meeting with the View Hotel at the same time, maybe in the evening. At the View Hotel. The View Hotel. The same with Gouldings. You had a Twitter chili than Lord so so Pro Temp Chair. Thank you, Speaker Damon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the record, we do have Honorable Norman MBA here with us in the chambers. With that, colleagues, any other further announcements? Honorable Daniels, staff, did you hear Honorable Daniels' request, I guess, working together on May 1st to get that the tour scheduled? So I guess staff, Mr. Rico and his team will definitely make sure to work with you, Honorable Daniels. With that, let me go ahead and spear across the floor. I do have Honorable Danny Simpson and then Honorable Casey Allen Johnson in the queue. Honorable Danny Simpson waves it off. With that, Honorable Casey Allen Johnson, the most distinguished gentleman from Cameron, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Damon, I appreciate that. And just want to thank all my colleagues here today and those that are on the call. Thank you for being with us and getting this, getting through this NABI meeting. I'd like to go ahead and make an announcement. This is on behalf of Honorable Pro Tem Speaker Carl Slater. He's inviting all the delegates to attend Navajo Talent Marketplace launch at Quality Inn right now. So once we conclude from here, let's go down and show our support as council delegates on the talent search that's going on right now at the Quality Inn. So just wanted to make that announcement. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Honorable Johnson. With that, colleagues, that is going on currently. If you want to go down there, they will be having that set up, and it's with the Mr. Moroni Benali is the one that's spearheading that with an outside organization. So with that, colleagues, is there any other further announcements at this time? That, let me go ahead and go back to the floor. Honorable Ariso, floor is yours at this time.
Just want to let Honorable Damon, Speaker Pro Tem, and members of 25th Navajo Nation Council, there's a BIA right-of-way meeting going on now, also at the McKinley County Courthouse for Eastern Agency delegates. Right-of-way update is the meeting going on right now. So if you can make it there, we should be able to make it. Idea.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and if there's any more further information, colleagues can reach out. Mr. Manurico, I don't know if you have that information, but we can reach out to Cheryl Curley at the BIA office to get more information and possibly send out an email out to, if not just the Eastern Agency and New Mexico delegates, and actually the whole entire council, especially RDC members as well, to understand right-of-way services across the Navajo Nation. That, let me go ahead and go back to the floor. I do have Honorable Danny Simpson. Honorable Simpson, floor is yours at this time.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn. That, colleagues, before I recognize the motion to adjourn, I just have an announcement too as well. There is a leadership meeting, colleagues, that will be happening at Twin Arrows this coming Saturday on the water rights. Starts at 9 a.m. Flagstaff time. Flagstaff time, 10 a.m. Window Alamo to Hajile time. So, colleagues, 9 a.m. That's starting. And then next week at 7:30 a.m., there'll be a prayer service for active military members, sponsored with Honorable Shauna Ann Claw has invited everybody to the Veterans Park before the spring session begins. And again, colleagues, that prayer service starts at 7:30 in the morning right here at the Veterans Park across the street. So if you're around in the morning, please attend that prayer service. Working together, there'll be that Goulding's tour. And last but not least, starting on Monday, these are our colors. Navajo Nation Council spring session, first color teal, Monday, Tuesday's green, Wednesday's blue. Thursday, all the guys need to wear pink. And last but not least, reds on Friday. Colleagues that are on travel back today or tomorrow or for the remainder of the week, safe travels. Make sure everything works together. And if you have not taken your photo, colleagues, for the new poster, so Burnside is just going to put a happy face on the poster or a sad face on the poster when he prints it. So make sure you get your photo with Mr. Burnside, and he's going to be doing that all day tomorrow, today and tomorrow, in the conference, in the North Conference Room at the council chamber. So with that, there's a motion by Honorable Danny Simpson, second by Honorable Casey Allen Johnson, to go ahead and adjourn. Honorable Danny Simpson, is it on the adjournment? Well, there's a comment on the motion to adjourn. With that, Honorable, there's Honorable Yazi. We are getting a text message information that you're wanting to speak on the motion to adjourn.
Sorry then, never mind.
Go ahead. What were you wanting to speak on?
I wanted to ask a question about when the Energy Task Force meeting was rescheduled.
Where's it at? What time does it start? Does it start at 9? Colleagues, there's no rescheduling. That meeting is tomorrow at Navajo Department of Transportation. There's no call-in. and it's at here in San Benito, New Mexico, just around the river bend. Starting at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, colleagues. And that's the first meeting, and then the next meetings will be held the first week of May. So again, there's no call-in. Did you have any further questions on that, Honorable Yazzie?
Yes, I was wondering if one of the staff would be able to record it for us. Is that possible?
Thank you. Let me go ahead and turn the floor over to Honorable our Chief of Staff, Mr. Manny Rico, to answer that question for you, Honorable Yazzie.
Good afternoon, Honorable Vice Chair Yazzie and members of the 25th Nation Council. We will, it is in person only. We will be sending 1 or 2 staff assistants over there. We will work to see if we can record it. If not, they can provide a report back to the council. Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you. If there's no other comments or questions, we are adjourning 12:51 p.m. Motion by Honorable Danny Simpson, second by Honorable Casey Allen Johnson. That went twice. Going 3 times. Let's go to board, around the horn.
Okay, it's up. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Honorable Shauna Ann Claw, how do you vote? Honorable Shauna Ann Claw votes green via text. Honorable Amber Kenez Bakrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenez Bakrati votes green via text. Madam Speaker Crystalline Crowley, how do you vote? Madam Speaker Crystalline Crowley votes green via text. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James. Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Dr. Andy Nez votes green. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez votes green. Honorable Nathan Nota, how do you vote? Honorable Nathan Nota votes green. Honorable Shandine Parrish, how do you vote? Honorable Shandine Parrish votes green. Honorable Jermaine Simonson, how do you vote? Honorable Jermaine Simonson votes green. Honorable George Toth, how do you vote? Honorable George Toth votes green. Honorable Curtis Unito, how do you vote? Honorable Curtis Unito votes green. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie, how do you vote? Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green via text. Going back up, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton, how do you vote? Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. I did accidentally. Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton did not vote. Honorable Sherilyn Yazzie votes green via text. With that, for the record, Honorable Lamardo Asturet, Brenda Jesus, Carl Slater, and Otto So are excused. So with that, Pro Tem Chair, you have 18 delegates who voted in favor, 0 who opposed, with Pro Tem Chair Honorable Seth Damon not voting.
Thank you very much, colleagues. With that, we're officially adjourned at 12:51 p.m. with a vote of 18 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting with that. Thank you very much. If you're listening in today and being a part of the Navajo Nation legislative branch government process, thank you very much to all the legislations that were passed. Again, those will all be moved forward that were not final authority to the Navajo Nation Council for final authority next week, beginning at our Navajo Nation spring session, which begins on Monday, April 17th. And with that, colleagues, have a good rest of your day. Have a good weekend moving forward, and we will be back here on Monday morning. Yeah.